Good afternoon, everybody. First, না এদের এসব জোড়াটোড়া আছে, আমি হাত দিতে ভয় পাচ্ছি, একটু চেক করে নাও। এটা না, শুধু এটা। Good afternoon, everybody. First, let me
একটু কাছে গিয়ে বলুন তাহলে।
First, let me extend a very warm welcome on behalf of Calcutta University Teachers Association. As you all know that there is a new economic policy coming over us over the last 3 years. Like many other things, the present government at the center took the advantage of the pandemic and the more or less exclusion of the people from things other than the disease and etc. And they passed this new economic policy, and some of the states have already implemented it. West Bengal did not. West Bengal government, they said that they would be implementing it later. They would bring up an alternative policy, and for that matter, they constituted 2 committees in the last 2 years. But unfortunately, we did not have, or the report given by those committees, both of these committees, did not see the light of the day. Then suddenly, and we are also, yes, originally we had organized some programs singly or with other associations to discuss the pros and cons of the new education policy, what can be done, how can we react and others. But when West Bengal government said that they would be waiting for the report of the so-called committees, we also taken aback and we did not bother to discuss all about these things. We are waiting for what our state government would be doing, knowing fully well that this new education policy and in the higher education, this curriculum and credit-based framework is posing 2 types of difficulties for us. The very first thing is that there is a big structural change. What we had as in our education system, the secondary school system, then the higher secondary, then college, and after that post-graduation and research, that whole structure is being broken down. Now it's 5 plus 3 plus 2 plus again 4, etc., etc., etc. That is, there is some change in the exterior of the whole education system. But more dangerous is what is going on inside. In the name of teaching ancient Indian system and etc., etc., they have a very clear agenda. And that is more dangerous to us. Apart from it is 5 plus 3 plus 3 or whatever it is, that can be adopted. But more dangerous is this hidden agenda of teaching these type of things, especially in the higher thing. And the other part is that they are saying that they are making the education system very flexible, especially in the higher education system. Definitely they have borrowed this from USA. That is, you can come, you can go, your credits should be stored in a bank, and a student can leave the college with a certificate, with a diploma, with a degree, and then with a degree with research, etc., etc., something. But one should understand that our socio-economic realities are not like USA. We haven't, still now, even with Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan and everything, we haven't been able to put all our students in the school and haven't been able to make it sure that they at least complete the school. So this type of incoming and outgoing will lead to more and more dropouts even in the higher education system. But again, just for last 1 month, we are seeing that West Bengal government has become too active. On 17th of March, it was a Friday, almost at the dead of night at 8 o'clock or something, all the registrars of the universities, they got a mail from the higher education department that they have to implement this curriculum and credits-based framework from this academic year only. Then within 1 week, the higher education minister, he said that he will be forming a committee of vice chancellors who will decide that whether this can be done or not done from this year and so and so. Then he is saying that he, after this vice chancellor committee, they submit their reports, he will compose a committee of the principals, they will again give a report. But the next academic session is almost at the door. The higher secondary examination is already done, and also the other examinations of class 12 for other boards. So the students are waiting to join their college. So if this goes on, the committees after committees, and nobody knows whether their reports of the committees will come out or not, that is, we are in a loss. And then we are seeing that the chancellor of all our universities, the governor, he suddenly became very active. He is going to different universities and preaching the benefits of the new education policy, and he is encouraging the others that they should go for the new education policy in this year or this academic year only. In this juncture, we have arranged this discussion, and we are very happy to have 3 very eminent speakers with us. We have Professor Dinesh Aprol, who is a very active person in the Joint Forum of Movement for Education. He is with ISID. It studies what is going on in the industrial sector. He is a very well-known scientist. We are very happy that he accepted our invitation and he has come. Then we have Professor Surojit Majumdar from Jawaharlal Nehru University. Surojit belongs to the Center for Studies in Economics and Planning in JNU. He has done lots of work on globalization and its effects, and also on issues of education and others. Then we have with us Anirban Chattopadhyay. Anirban is also from economics, but Anirban spent his time in, he was the editor of Anandabazar Potrika. And in Anandabazar Potrika, he is a renowned journalist. So I welcome all the 3 speakers. I am happy that they accepted our invitation. May I now invite the speakers on the podium? Professor Dinesh Aprol, Professor Surojit Majumdar, and Sri Anirban Chattopadhyay. We have with us our Professor Parthibo Bosu, who will moderate the discussion. Parthibo was the president of Calcutta for the last term, and he is a professor of geology of our university. Parthibo will moderate the discussion. So I welcome again all the speakers and our moderator. I hope we will have a fruitful discussion, and in case of West Bengal, we would have to have a guideline from the speakers. What will be emerging from this discussion will be helpful in deciding what we will do, how we will react to the government and others' decisions. So it's over to you, Parthibo.
Friends, the president of our association has already set the context of today's discussions, and we have 3 very eminent panelists with us who would deliberate on various aspects of this new education policy. So as the moderator of this discussion, it's my duty to also say a few words to further set the context and also sort of set the broad sort of outline of today's deliberation. So, first of all, the medium of our deliberation would be kind of mixed. So, there are speakers here with us who are not very comfortable, either not comfortable in Bengali or cannot speak Bengali. So, it will be a mixed deliberation. Surajit would mix, he assured me, a mixed Bengali with English, but it is English and Bengali a little bit, so that will be the medium of his deliberation. Anirban will speak in Bengali. I will, whenever I need to interject, I will use both the languages. So after these discussions, after their deliberations, the floor would be open for any query, any clarification that the audience may need. So as Mohalaya has already stated, so we had a draft new education policy that was released in 2019, and as this draft came out, there were a lot of discussions in the country, across the country, and various stakeholders had given in their opinions, very strong opinions about many aspects of this 484-page draft policy, which was sort of chaired by or authored by a committee that was chaired by Kasturi Rangan. Of course, we never knew who were the other members. That's another matter of that committee that brought out that draft report. Following which, when the entire country was reeling under the pandemic and there was a total lockdown all around, the new economic policy was the government put its seal on the new economic policy. So it was finalized and it was brought out, and felt like we were ambushed more or less, because there was no discussion in the parliament and suddenly it was thrust upon us, and I maintain that it was thrust upon us. We never had any chance to discuss or deliberate on the policy, neither in the parliament nor in any other sort of civil society forum. Anyway, so that was not the first policy document on education, as you all know, and we should keep that in view. It is perhaps the third or the fourth such policy document. The first one was in 1968, following the Education Commission that was set up in 1964, that ran for 2 years, and following which in 1968 the first policy was brought out. The second policy was in 1986, brought out by Rajiv Gandhi, the Rajiv Gandhi government. And 92 there was a bit of a modification of that when Narasimha Rao government took over. And then you have this 2020 NEP. So what does a policy do to education? What does it entail? For a country like India, or for that matter any country, wherever such policy or any policy document comes out on any matter for any sector of development, be it human resource, be it any other societal sort of issues, the couple of things that perhaps need to be ensured. First of all, does it deliver equity and accessibility? Number one. Number two, does it uphold the constitutional values for the sector, for whatever the policy is brought out? Does it ensure democratic norms? Does it ensure autonomy? Talking about education, does it talk about autonomy in administering such policies? These are some of the issues that really are matters of concern as we discuss NEP today. Seems to us that Although education is in the concurrent list, states were not quite consulted. Although the universities are supposed to, autonomy, the academic autonomy, which is the hallmark of any university governance, was totally set aside because universities were not quite consulted, even now, as it is being promulgated. So these are issues, these are definite issues, and talking about higher education, for which, so it's a, it cuts across from primary education, pre-primary education to higher education. So there are various stakeholders involved in this. But today we are here to discuss about its, the import, what it means, this new education policy for higher education. And as you know, so it really talks about radicalizing higher education or the entire education, spectrum of the country. There's nothing wrong with it. One can always, ask for radical change in any sector. But one has to make sure that trying to make it, a radical, trying to make it look radical, the leap should not be sort of damaging. So you're trying to leap across, you shouldn't fall and break your limbs. So we need to discuss all this today. There is a huge amount of confusion. I was talking to two of our speakers today as we are coming here. There is a huge amount of confusion even within the primary stakeholders of the education sector in the country today, in the state, definitely. Among the university and college teachers, there's a big amount of confusion. No one quite knows what's going to happen. Broadly, there are, of course, speakers will say, broadly, the major hallmarks of this new education policy when it comes to higher education is this, that it's going to change the institutional structure of the higher education institutions. So there's going to be teaching universities, research universities, and the autonomous and constituent colleges. And the constituent colleges and the teaching universities apparently can graduate to the teaching and research universities. That's what the policy document states. This is number one. Number two, it talks about flexibility all across in choosing curriculum, in the curriculum framework, etc., etc. And this document also talks about, changing the regulatory structure of the entire higher education system. Instead of one, it would have, it would have 4 arms of a large regulatory body, which they say is going to be the Higher Education Council of India. So these are the major elements in this education policy. I'm just trying to, put up the broad structure. I'm not here to make any opinion, my own personal opinion on any of these for which the speakers are there for. Quickly, one major element of that is the change in the post-school higher education, the credit and curriculum framework for a 4-year program, 4-year undergraduate program. So what does it mean? The CCFUP, as it is known in its abbreviated form, so basically it talks about UG, so there will be various levels of exits from the college level education. First one would be after 1 year. One can exit after 2 years with a diploma. One can exit after 3 years with a degree. One can exit after 4 years with an honors degree. One can also have an honors with research degree. So there are 5 different kinds of degrees which one can have. And in the first year of, after, if one opts out from higher education after 1 year, after the first year, he gets a certificate. That is one. Flexibilities are the basic hallmark of this particular curriculum framework. So what are those flexibilities? Flexibility to move from one discipline to another discipline of study. Okay, you start with mathematics, you can suddenly move into literature. Opportunity of the learners to choose the course of interest in all disciplines, right? Facilitating multiple entry and exit, as I said, of course, one can go out, one can come in, breezing in, breezing out, so that would go on. And of course, alternate various modes of learning, online learning, offline learning. One can go and earn a credit from somewhere and come back again, okay? And all that, there will be an academic bank of credit. In the UG, the certificate diploma degree framework, one needs to earn 40 credits in the first year itself. And in 2 semesters, so what would all be taught in the first year of this? So various things, from whatever major discipline one chooses. So apart from, and seems to me there will be hardly any teaching on the major subject which the student has chosen. So that almost takes a back seat, and the other areas of whatever, so one can take a minor discipline. So huge emphasis on the minor disciplines there, and also some, they call it ability enhancement courses and and value-added categories. Okay, in value-added categories, one talks about from yoga to understanding India, ancient India and all that. Okay, I just flagged this. So essentially, in the first year of study, a student basically a student is given a very disparate set of education elements that does not really equip the student with anything apart from certain preset elements of quote-unquote knowledge. I do not even know whether one can call them elements of knowledge, whatever way you construe it. Anyway, and it goes on, and then again I'll stop here. So there is this, we have tried to summarize this entire CCFUP from the association. We have circulated this, and anybody who's interested, so there is this copy, you can collect it from us, which would take you, give you a glimpse of what it really means. And lot of self-contradictions all around, okay? This policy, moving on from here to, so there is this huge huge thing about the vocational education, okay? So apparently vocational education is fantastic, of course, skill enhancement, vocational education, all the way, but how many credits in each? If you compare it, so you are neither doing this nor doing that, okay? So one, it would appear so. And so there are various issues with this. Infrastructure is a major issue. The teaching resource is a major issue. Who will provide the textbook, etc., so that the content, the first year of education, that gives you the certificate, the content of this, who provides that, seems to me it is going to come from a centralized source. Needs to be, we need to really be, very, very careful about this content, about this understanding India part of it particularly. So all these issues are there. And I'm sure in today's deliberation, we have about Each speaker will speak for about 25 minutes or so, 30 minutes, 25 to 30 minutes, and following which we are expecting a discussion. So let the audience, speak up, and after they have listened to all our speakers. May I have Surajit to start with, perhaps?
Thank you, and my thanks to the Calcutta University Teachers Association for this opportunity to participate in this discussion or deliberations on the new education policy and its implications for what we do. And I should begin with an apology, the hint of which has already been given to you. এরকম একটা বিষয় করে বাংলায় বলার আমার না অভ্যেস আছে না ক্ষমতা আছে। Having lived in Delhi and North India for 58 years, I have very little use of Bangla except some conversations in the household. That too has come down because I'm not married to a Bengali. So, and my parents have been gone for some time. So, that is my limitation. I'm chesta korbo to intersperse my presentation in English with Bangla. So the issue that I would like to focus on is what Dr. Parthiv was referring to. See, the new education policy agenda is quite extensive. Okay. And there is, can I have the first slide, please? Which includes completely redrawing the structure by which higher education is regulated and also how higher educational institutions are governed. So a complete restructuring or overhauling of this structure is part of the agenda of the education policy adopted in 2020. However, and as part of that policy, the University Grants Commission of the UGC is supposed to be abolished. Okay. It's not something that is supposed to exist. UGC, AICT, all other regulatory institutions are to be abolished. ওদেরকে শেষ করে একটা নতুন স্ট্রাকচার খাড়া করার প্ল্যান আছে কি Higher Education Commission of India, the chapter vertical, আর ওইগুলো will be looking at different aspects of the regulation of higher education. A policy te bola hoyeche ki regulation will be tight but light. Implication of that is that regulations will be strictly enforced, but not too much would be regulated. That's the only plausible meaning one can give to the idea that regulation will be tight but light. But jeta hocche ekhon, what is happening today is that the existing structure, because bringing about these changes in the whole regulatory structure involves a lot of legislation, and because education is a concurrent subject, it is not so simple to put that in place. So the immediate process that is happening is the existing structure as a UGC powers of regulation যেগুলো আছে ওইগুলোকে extend করে it is through the UGC regulations, guidelines that the structure of degree programs, how people get in, what are the requirements of getting a degree, what are the minimum norms for that, what kind of content should be there, all of this is being changed or restructured. And de facto, this new system of regulation is coming into place without actually the structure having been modified. Next slide, please. It's part of that process of implementation is also changes in the way institutions are being run. Because if you look at what changes are happening today, Maybe 15 years, 20 years, 30 years earlier, these are changes in the curriculum framework, in what are the requirements a student has to complete in order to get a particular degree. Where would these be discussed and talked about and formulated? That's not where it's happening now. It's coming from the top. So you're already, in effect, moving to a more top-down system of governance, where teachers who are actually, or faculty who are actually involved in the process, have no say. They are being given or handed down things that they have to execute and implement. And your only degree of freedom is within that boundary. Whatever has to be done has to be you. That's the only area where you are required to exercise your own mind and your own thought about what should be the content of that should decide that a student has to do in order to get a particular degree. Next slide, please. If you put it on full screen mode and change it, it will move. Next to it. You can move slide by slide. Yeah? Adobe खुलते হবে। So what I want to begin with is first discuss the background to what's really happening. Why are all these pressures coming to alter the structure of our degree programs? This specific question is, what's the background to this? What's behind this? So I would like to draw your attention to the fact that this policy has come in the background of what might be called very significant changes in the Indian higher education system, or the higher education situation, if you prefer. Which is that if you look at the last 20 years particularly, since the beginning of the century, we have seen an unprecedented and massive growth of enrollment in higher education. A very sharp increase in what is called the gross enrollment ratio, the number of students in higher education relative to the population in the 18 to 23 age group. When Amra Chatra chilo, mota 5% chilo. Ajke it is approaching 30%. Which means also that a very larger and larger proportion of the population in the country is of people who have a higher education degree, at least one higher education degree. So this is something which is a dramatic change that has been observed in the last 20 years. But if you notice here, that dramatic rise has also now slowed down in the last 5 years. If you look at the figures there, you can see that in the last 5 years, the increase in the enrollment has been of a much lower order than in the preceding years. Okay. So there is a massive increase in enrollment for some reason, and then that has slowed down. Next slide, please. The other remarkable aspect of this increase in enrollment is that it has been accompanied by a great diversification in the social background of students in higher education. The most dramatic picture is of women in higher education. So female students today, their proportion in higher education is higher than their proportion in the population. And they have a gross enrollment ratio which is higher than for males. Okay. You look at historically socially marginalized groups like scheduled castes, scheduled tribes, you find that there too, their enrollment as a proportion of the total enrollment is coming closer, much closer to their share in the population. The only significant social group where a big gap still exists between its representation in the population and its representation in higher education is the Muslim minority. Muslim minority, not other minorities, only the Muslim minority. Otherwise, most other social groups, you find that their representation in higher education is coming close to their share in the total population. So, yes. No, female share is slightly higher than their share in the population. So their gross enrollment ratio is higher than for males. Yes. But even amongst them, in several states, the representation of women is higher. Yes. So in Kerala, there are most Muslim girls in higher education than boys. I'm saying even in their case, the women representation is higher. Okay. So the gender balance has moved positively across all groups. Across all groups. Okay. So if you look at simply this bold facts, it would appear that for some inexplicable reason, in the last 20 years, the access to higher education has become more democratized than it ever historically has been. And that's a bit of a paradox. How did this happen?
Let us
Allow me to complete. Allow me to have my say.
No, let him speak.
Let me complete. Then you can understand why I'm saying certain thing. Okay. So the next slide, please. Okay. If you look at even university enrollment, okay. Sorry. Please, can you go back? Yeah. Okay. Go one slide further. Okay. Now, if you look at the public expenditure or public investment in education, what has happened in this period that we are talking about is, after the 1991 economic reforms, the long process of a slow rising share of GDP being spent on education. That ends. And what you have is a stagnation in the level of public expenditure on education. This graph goes up to 2003. Next slide, please. And you can see that since then also, the level of public expenditure on education has not gone further. So the new education policy repeats the old objective of reaching 6% of GNP or GDP for education, but there is no trend of movement towards 6% that we see. What in fact we see is a stagnation. Next slide, please. And within this total, So what has actually happened? How has this particular expansion happened when you have had public expenditure and public investment in education stagnating, and of which very small part actually goes towards higher education? General higher education is less than 0.5% of GDP, and technical education is about 0.75%. The bulk of this 4% also goes towards school education rather than higher education. So with stagnation in the level of public expenditure on education, how have you had this massive growth of enrollment and a more representative enrollment of students, socially representative enrollment? Clearly, this has not happened because of expansion in public investment, but happened primarily because of, or through privatization, increased privatization of higher education. So undergraduate enrollment, you see a significant part now is in private institutions. Next slide, please. And in professional courses, it is even higher. If you look at university enrollment also, the last bastion of the public institutions, that's also breaking. That university enrollment largely was in public universities, okay? But if you look at the last 5 years, you see again, stagnation in the enrollment has also started appearing as far as universities are concerned, but the bulk of the increase in enrollment is either happening in private universities or it is happening in public open universities, not in regular universities. Okay. Next slide, please. So, now this is also in a certain economic background, and that's what makes it somewhat paradoxical. At first sight, somewhat paradoxical. Okay, because privatization of higher education means people have to pay more for that education as compared to public education. So if people are paying more, and that's how greater access to higher education has been gained, and even by those who have been historically deprived of the right to education, if that is how it is happening, how does one reconcile this with the larger economic trends where we have seen actually inequalities rise in this country? That the top 10% share in income has increased dramatically in this same period. Okay. You have massive unemployment in this country. The proportion of our working age population which is working is coming down. Okay. And their earnings, most people, the 90% have to earn from some kind of work. And the earnings from different kinds of work are extremely low. The average is 10 to 12,000 rupees per month from different kinds of employment. And the limited employment, white collar employment, which is of relatively higher salary, that is a very small fraction or proportion of the total employment, as you can see from income tax statistics. Business incomes can be hidden from income tax departments, but high salary incomes are usually not hidden because of the TDS system. So all high salary incomes are captured in the income tax data. But the proportion of people who are earning more than 42,000 rupees a month in 2008, you can say it's about 50,000 rupees today per month. That's less than 2% of your total workforce. So the bulk of people who work are not getting high salaries. So how do you explain what is this process that is happening? So the only explanation I can offer is that what has actually happened is that this bifurcation in the employment market between some high salaried employment, white collar employment, and the bulk of the situation being either you are condemned to unemployment or very low earnings, induces a widespread social demand for higher education, as that is seen as the only possible route to access reasonable employment. And this happens across social groups because then it also represents the only possible route to any kind of economic and social mobility. And that's what has been taken advantage of by private higher education. Okay. So the willingness of people to pay is based on this underlying reality and the impetuses that it has generated. That has been taken advantage of by the private sector. However, that process is also reaching a limit because once you reach 27-28%, you've already reached the limit of people who can pay for that kind of an education, and that's for the stagnation. In the absence of any public expansion of higher education, the enrollment is stagnating, or they opt for open systems where the cost of that education is also significantly lower. So the privatization or the expansion of the private sector in higher education is also in a sense reaching limits because of these underlying economic conditions. And it also of course means that as you are producing larger and larger number of products from the Indian higher education system, but you don't have the employment opportunities growing at a corresponding proportion, you are also increasing the number of people who are choosing to pay for a higher education in order to get to a certain kind of economic status, but an increasing gap between this number of people who are seeking to improve their status and the limited capacity to satisfy those aspirations. which is also something which is potentially politically explosive tendency, a tendency which has potential to explode politically at some point of time. If you have this increasing gap between the aspirations which are driving the demand for higher education and the inability of the system to actually satisfy those aspirations. Next slide, please. Now, this is the background in which the new policy comes. And what does it offer as a way of addressing the challenges that this context has posed? So keep in mind that, therefore, any government, any state today has to take into account the fact that there is, no doubt, comparison to the past, an increased social demand for higher education across different social groups, and a political need to respond to that particular imperative is something that exists. Okay. But how is it to be done in a situation where the same economic situation also restricts your ability to expand public expenditure? That's the background. Now, if you look at the NAP, as far as the economic trajectory is concerned, and what is going to happen to the employment situation, the NAP begins with the assumption that really this trajectory is what will continue. That employment opportunities of a kind which most people have to rely on nowadays will shrink even further as a result of technological developments. So, on the one hand, the proportion of employment of a particular kind which requires a higher education training will increase. And one requirement, therefore, that they think the educational reform has to satisfy is to meet that requirement. Next, please. Okay. So what is the solution that is being proposed? How are the new generation of students to be prepared for the future? You look back to the past, and essentially the whole movement towards some kind of specialization in fields of knowledge and all of that, you dispense with that and go back to the situation where a varied set of things are going to be. Okay. Political regime is there. The essence of the argument is that you do not need, you basically need this kind of what we might have otherwise called hodgepodge kind of education is what is the requirement of the time. So the content of degree programs have to alter to meet that particular requirement, and every institution is required to become capable of offering degree programs which offer this kind of a mixture. Okay. Next slide. Okay. But it also says that a very important component of the reform has to be a much greater weightage being given to vocational education. And this is in a bit of a contradiction. If your economic trajectory and technological trajectory is going to be such that most of the activities that are done by manual labor are going to be eliminated, what are you going to do with this vocational education? So implicit in this whole understanding is that the education system is really preparing two groups of people. One set of people for those cream of the jobs which the fourth industrial revolution will require, and another set of people who basically will be given some training and skill and have to find their own employment with that. Okay. Because jobs of that kind will not be available. So you have to create your own employment. So more and more self-employment of this kind is what is to be promoted. So implicit in the whole conceptualization of what challenge the reforms are addressing is this notion of two different streams of people emerging out of the system. Next, please. Okay. Now the question is, if this one part is these changes, the other part is you have to expand enrollment. How is that going to be done? Now, the current problem is you don't have enough public investment and you don't have enough ability to pay for private higher education. So that both ways you are facing a barrier. So the promise that is made is that public investment has to increase. But if you go through the entire national policy document, there isn't one concrete suggestion or proposal as to how this problem that you have not been able to resolve since 1968 of increasing public expenditure of education to 6% of GFP, how that is going to be dealt with. Not a single concrete proposal is there. But there are all very specific proposals as to how you will encourage further growth of private higher education. But that private higher education is also confronting this problem of the ability to pay. Next slide, please. Okay. So, how do you resolve these multiple sets of problems? So, you want to find a cheap way of increasing access to higher education. So, online and distance learning are the ways by which you seek to increase the enrollment. So, you respond to the social demand for higher education by expanding online and distance learning. Okay. It allows the public system to expand without significant expenditure. I'm sure most open learning systems also or online systems don't involve a lot of expenditure. They are cheap for both the provider as well as the buyer of that particular service. Okay. So that's your answer to the question of how to increase enrollment. For the private sector, also it offers an opportunity to access a larger market if you can offer online or distance learning options. So you can access the market which cannot pay for your regular course by offering these online options. So the possibilities of opening up, of getting your entire degree through an online system, where you never go to an institution. That's one part of the story. The other part is even in regular institutions, the promotion of what is called blended education, where some part will be done online. Next, please. Okay. And as I said, specific proposals to, of course, allow private sector to expand, including explicit thing that they have to recover whatever has to be spent on their education. So, no regulation of fees which will limit their ability to recover their investments. Next, please. And of course, there's this two-sided process of internationalization of higher education, which is that Indian higher education institutions, like different companies in different sectors, sell in the domestic market as well as in the export market. Indian higher education institutions can also have domestic consumers and foreign consumers. And similarly, just as we buy products which are imported from other parts of the world, we can also have Indian producers selling the same products in the Indian market. So Indian higher education consumers will also be able to access, if you allow foreign institutions to set up shop here, they will also have access to higher education. Next, please. And this is, of course, the very important component of it, which is that you have this multiple exit options. Okay. What does this mean? Multiple exit options with the academic bank for credits. What it means is that you can no longer think of, say, a bachelor's degree program as one whole, in which students' learning happens on the basis of doing a definite combination of courses in a definite sequence of time within a definite period of time. So, you normally think of, when you're thinking of a bachelor's degree program, say undergraduate program, you will think of, okay, what courses should they do first? What should they do in the second year? What are the prerequisites for the courses they will do in the second year, which you must do before? And how over the 3 years they will The cumulative effect of that will produce a certain kind of learning outcome. But you can't think of them like this anymore. Because the same program must allow an exit option after 1 year with a certificate degree, an exit option after 2 years with a diploma, an exit option after 3 years or 4 years with a bachelor's degree. That is, the first year of your 3-year bachelor's degree program and the certificate course are identical. And not only that, when you get a certificate, you can bank it, keep it in the bank, academic bank, and whenever later you can find time and means to come back to the system, you can come and enter the second year of the program. And you then become eligible to get a diploma after 1 year because you already have a certificate. Once you got the diploma, you can exit again. Come back. Okay. Come back after a few years and then to a 3rd year, and then you get a bachelor's degree. Okay. You can get a bachelor's degree with that. So you could get a bachelor's degree based on this fragmented process of learning spread over. And this is not all. The fragmentation, so the courses that you do in each need not be done in the same institution. You could combine different institutions. Need not be done in one mode. You can do some in the institution, you can do some online. So the whole process is to be broken up and fragmented, and no institution and no faculty can control or determine what exactly is the process combination by which the student is going to get a degree. Now, how does this relate to the background in which it is happening? That this, what this does is to allow, and I use the analogy of the mobile phone. The mobile phone market is a vast market. There are people with limited means to buy, there are people with lots of money. Okay. And you have telephone companies offering a whole range of, mobile phone manufacturers have a whole range of products to cater to different sections of the market. From standard low-cost phones to very expensive ones. What this does is to allow higher educational institutions to offer a whole range of products. You don't have the money to do a course in my university or institution, doesn't matter, you can do one course. If you can't do a regular course, you can do an online course. So on the one hand, it allows enrollment to be in a sense artificially expanded without necessarily offering a proper education. On the other hand, it allows private providers of higher education also to access a larger market. The market which does not have the ability to pay for a full-time, full course that they offer. It allows them also access to that. So you can privatize the system further, you can increase the enrollment further, and if the implication of this is that the quality of education suffers, it doesn't matter. The economy in any case doesn't require all these higher education products. It doesn't matter if the products are, the learning outcomes are poor. They have, because there is no demand for such a large number of higher education products within the economy. So it really doesn't matter if the quality is bad. If the learning outcomes are poor, that doesn't in any way impose a cost. But it also incorporates a new form of inequality in access to education, which is that historically we thought of inequality in access as whether you can get into the formal higher education system or not. So those who got it had access, those who didn't have access. Here it is, people will be coming into the system, enrollment ratios can expand. But the financial burden of getting that higher education will be actually regressive. That those who have lesser ability to pay, relative to their incomes, will have to pay more for an education. because so much of the burden of expenditure is on them. They are the ones who will also have less ability to do full courses in the requisite time. They will be the ones who will lose out most from the fragmentation of the process. So the learning outcomes will also be different. And if the learning outcomes are going to be different, it also means, of course, apart from several other factors, this is also going to contribute to very differential access to the very limited employment opportunities that are available through the higher education system. So it's a new kind of inequality in access to higher education that is going to be created through this particular system. And of course, it means that in general, the quality of learning outcomes will suffer apart from the fact that there will be differential access. So in a sense, you will have increase in enrollment, but not necessarily a significant improvement in the educational attainment of the population. And that doesn't matter for the economy as it is today. It also is politically less of a problem. The better educated the unemployed people are, the more politically explosive the situation is. Thank you.
ধন্যবাদ সুরজিৎ, চমৎকার ব্যাখ্যা করলেন এই নতুন যে শিক্ষানীতি, নিউ এডুকেশন পলিসি, it's how, why is it turning out to be top down despite all this talk in the policy about light but tight governance, etc. মানে ভেতরে এই শিক্ষানীতির পেছনে কি চিন্তা কাজ করেছে চমৎকারভাবে তুলে আনলেন, যে এই যে মানে স্পেশালাইজেশনের বদলে পুরো জিনিসটা ঘেঁটে দিয়ে একটা চচ্চড়ি বানিয়ে যে মানুষের সামনে হাজির করা, ছাত্রদের সামনে হাজির করা, এর পেছনে কি চিন্তা, এবং এই ফ্র্যাগমেন্টেড লার্নিং এর আসলে কার উদ্দেশ্য সিদ্ধ করছে এটা, এবং এই ফ্লেক্সিবল এক্সিট এন্ট্রি ইত্যাদি এর ফলে কিভাবে এই ইকুইটি এবং অ্যাক্সেস, যেটা এই এডুকেশন পলিসির একটা মুখ্য অভিমুখ হওয়া উচিত, যেটাকে এনশিওর করা, সেটা কিভাবে তা প্রভাবিত হবে চমৎকারভাবে আমাদের সামনে রাখলেন। সুরজিতের পরে আমি ডেকে নেব অধ্যাপক দিনেশ আগরওয়াল। দিনেশ, the podium is for you. Okay. May I request the audience to keep their mobile phones in a silent mode? Yeah. So if we agree on that, then that's better for the entire proceedings. And you can have questions. You can have questions definitely. Let the speakers finish the deliberations and let there be discussion. Not that.
बंद कर दो ना। Thanks to Surajit for laying the context and there is some interference taking place.
Your phone.
My phone, I have not put it on silent, but it is on vibrate. No, it's not because of that. Unlike silent altogether. That okay.
Give the phone here.
Yeah. No. But I shouldn't forget, huh? Keep it with you.
But anyway, you don't need a microphone for this.
This hall. Yeah, both Surajit and me are used to doing public speaking, so we really don't need amplifying as much through these technological devices. I had a PowerPoint presentation, but I'm not going to use it. I think let it become a conversation. Let me build on what Surajit has shared with us, rather than really. What is it? Something else is happening also. Okay, fair enough. See, one thing is very clear.
Take a step back.
Okay. The new world, higher level of competencies and greater higher education access. There's no doubt about that in my mind, and I don't think there should be any doubt in our mind. We somewhere went from 9% to 27%, and we are wanting to now take the GR to much higher level, like 50% and plus. As a target, how government wants to achieve it, that has been explained by Surajit. It's quite fraudulent way of doing it through multiple entry exit or online. Hi. And there'll be claim, because this Jumla government is used to making all kinds of claims. And claims will be soon that we have now increased it to 40%, then by, that will be the kind of claim, because though people might have completed only 1 year of the 4-year program and people will drop out. Today also, there is in the school system similar situation. There are a huge amount of dropouts. But we are not able to fix the system. There's something else happening. Along with the thing which we need to fix, apart from that ability to pay is limited for the disadvantaged sections who are coming into now higher education system, and for them you require greater access to education, for higher education. In Europe, several countries have that. Either we make it that way, or those who can pay, but others who cannot pay, for them there should be complete freeships or scholarships and fellowships and so on, etc. But we see simultaneously this government reducing also the fellowships and scholarships. That's also a fact. This is a kind of a situation on the one hand. On the other hand, those whom we are outturning, the outturn from our institutions, is also facing higher level of unemployment. Never in the history of post-independent India we had graduate unemployment of the kind that we face today. And as you grow to PG level or PhD level, unemployment increases. That's also the other fact, that the education and the employment opportunities are completely mismatched. The second aspect is, when the system was set up, it was created with academic labor market in mind. Teachers being researchers being created. That was the case with 50s and 60s and 70s. Subsequently, other new labor markets did come in, and the industry and other people started talking of unemployable. These people are unemployable, employability challenge in the case of other labor markets. When we're talking of fixing the system, we're fixing at the supply end, we are also required to fix at the level of the demand. How do we build it? Not only ability to pay, but how does education match with the kind of new labor markets with which whether changes which are required to be done? Does this NEP deal with that particular challenge at all? My answer is no. It doesn't even talk of employment. In the whole education policy document, there is not a word called employment. There's fourth industrial revolution. But there is not word of employment. In fact, the 1986 policy itself had delinked education from degrees from employment. This has come after 42 years, 14 and 23, 37 years. And in the meanwhile, we've seen this whole huge amount of unemployment and the challenge of what is being called by the employers as that these people are unemployable for the other labor markets. Of course, in the academic labor market, there hasn't been much recruitment among the teachers. There have been vacancies in IITs, NITs, and name the institution, universities, central universities, all of them have those vacancies. And even the private institutions do not employ actually teachers that they need to employ, the academic labor market itself is very small. And today the other labor markets have grown. And for that, the unemployable element is being constantly talked about. If I go further, you have a huge amount of development facing us. Fixed education is itself a developmental challenge. Creating types of teachers itself is a huge challenge. But there are other challenges which are often talked about. We are supposed to transition from fossil fuels to the renewable energy. We are supposed to be making transition to reduce greenhouse gases emissions, and we need to adapt. Extreme weather events are very, very common. Urban planning, urban transition. When we started, we did not have the kind of urbanization which we have today. So if you look at the challenge of the urban areas, and we saw it in the COVID period, in the pandemic, there are no facilities for the people who have come from agrarian economy to the urban economy. Neither in terms of shelter nor in terms of facilities of water, sanitation, and all the related facilities which are required in an urban thing, and what to talk of public health determinants which are there, for which you require number of, again, public health professionals, not just doctors. Now, in all these areas, when we are facing a challenge, there is obviously a requirement of employment. People do need to be employed for these categories. If you look at our civil engineering, if you look at any our disciplines, because engineering education expanded hugely during this particular post-80s. In engineering education, and there are not enough people who want to enroll in private institutions. They're closing down. That's what the committee in 2003 had indicated. Further expansion should be stopped. ICT for a certain time had also given a barrier to further. Because this is also equally the context in which we are required to now respond to the national education policy, and we're going to ask the question whether it is responding or not. Our engineering education was built around and our four disciplines and ICT, the information and communication technology. They're huge number. In fact, the rest of the engineering disciplines were undervalued, whether it is electronics, whether it is civil, whether it is, you name the chemical, all the major disciplines, mechanical. In every discipline, there is lack of enrollment and the institutions are closing down. Some of them have even opened, there is a near Delhi I'm talking of, where the ICT sector expanded hugely in Gurgaon, in Noida. And there are institutions which are opened for ICT, today they don't have enrollment. Surajit referred to the limits and some of the specifics of the limits that we have reached. One of those institutions has opened now an akhada, Kushti ka akhada, wrestling. Buildings are cheap and they are using land institutions for totally different purposes. There's been no public investment in these institutions because much of this expansion took place through private investment. And neither they invested in teachers nor did they invest in the facilities and the infrastructure and in the. So as a result, today people are not willing to come and take admissions in these particular institutions. Now, if this is the case, of course people, whatever they find because employment in, they shift. So from engineering, people are shifting to pharmacy. Because the pharmaceutical industry could hold on during this particular period, rest of the manufacturing industry collapsed. We are import dependent altogether. Education and economy mismatch. We thought that we will be a manufacturing giant, ICT giant, superpower in biotechnology, superpower in energy. You see the documents of 90s and early 2000s, they're talking of course we're talking of these days also, Vishwaguru. At that time we used to talk about knowledge superpower. My boss, Mashelkar, Dr. Mashelkar, the Director General of CSIR, that's where from I retired as Chief Scientist from CSIR NISTAR, produced this particular report called Knowledge Superpower. You know, of course, rather than going into the details of what was wrong with it, but one thing became very, very clear, that we could not grow in much of the areas like being other than providing services to the foreign companies. And if startling fact, if I mention to you, you know, where are our institutions geared to now? To whom are they supplying S&T personnel? I'm taking up now specific sectors. You know, we have totally 5.5 lakh people involved with research and development and engineering related to R&D. Out of that 45%, which is 2.35 plus lakh, are working for the US company from Bangalore, Noida and Gurgaon. 45%. And whereas your own schemes, which account for, a survey was done very recently, 33% of the expenditure did not have any support in terms of knowledge production. And this is a Niti Aayog survey, the very recent survey, 2022. So it's not that you need to expand even academic labor market or R&D market. And it's not only investment in education, you need investment in the very opportunities which you want to give to people who are trained as quite worthy. These people are doing MTechs and PhDs, etc., many of them. And they are getting employment there only. And they work round the clock for the US companies. Whereas our Indian industry did not invest in R&D. Did not, so they are not able to employ people. Employment is either what is self-employment, or it is in these institutions, these industries, which have been set up by the. I'm talking of only US companies. If I take into US, counted for 2.25 lakh. If I add the European multinationals, if I add the Japanese multinationals, they're taking out huge amount of money. They're taking out intellectual property also. The question is, all our institutions today, the manpower which comes out, gets employment. Some of the best people who are not anymore need to go to Silicon Valley, they are working from here or that. Now, which means that if you need to link, and it's the last post-80s experience shows that these institutions could not link themselves to the industry. There's been often a university saying we should not be subjected to the industry because it is completely from the other end that there is no potential for the Indian industry, the R&D people wanting to actually collaborate with the university. All the teaching collaborations which are taking place, I recently looked at a thesis which has come out in 2021 itself. Most of the teaching collaboration between industry and the university, and I have some graphs also to show, is taking place between the foreign companies and the Indian institutions, to the extent that is taking place. Though majority of the institutions of ours are whatever publications, analysis, indicators which exist on the basis of, say, more than 66% of do not collaborate with anybody else. Most of them are standalone institutions, do not work with either industry, don't work with the government. But the ones who work, they're working with these, not with the Indian industry. So you have in the economy a situation, and in education, both sides, there is a disconnect for reasons that are structural to our both education as well as our economy. Why the Indian industry has the way to function? Because we did the liberalization, privatization, and globalization, and we became import dependent. If I start talking of import dependence, which means you don't manufacture things there, you don't produce things there. So see, if you want to situate education in the midst of the economy, saying when you want to link education to economy, please, my request is, my friend, my request is, please, let us. So if you link, if you are wanting to actually solve the problem and the crisis, how do you do it? Can you do it by clustering? Now I'm coming back from economy, society to the, what is the solution? Which the national education policy. First, it is not new education policy, it's national education policy. There's nothing national about it. It's a concurrent subject. Center and states have not sat together. They have not discussed it. How can it be called a national education policy? Constitutionally, this cannot be called. This is a policy of the union government. This is not a national education policy. That's the point which we need to keep in mind. But constitutionally, this area which is still a concurrent area, legally speaking, constitutionally speaking, it's a. Now, this particular policy, when it has not been discussed with the states, it should not be allowed to be a national policy. Now, plus, they're saying colleges. I was looking at the committee report of the Ministry of Human and some of them were at one is state, Jharkhand. There's an institute which has been opened called Jamshedpur Women's College, Jamshedpur, East Singhbhum, Jamshedpur Women's University. From colleges, it has been created through clustering, a university. Jharkhand, another Ranchi college, Ranchi, Dr. Shyama Prasad Mukherjee University. You know who's Dr. Shyama Prasad Mukherjee? Huh? I don't need to tell this particular gathering here. The third one is in Karnataka. There's a government science college autonomous, Bangalore Urban. It's been now called Narputhunga University. University, there is another Madhya Pradesh, Pandit S.N. Shukla Government PG, Shahdol, Pandit S.N. Shukla University. Colleges overnight, through some clustering, converted into an independent university. This is the process. There is no collaboration among even those colleges. This document talks of multidisciplinarity. Quite a large number of our institutions are already multidisciplinary. But it doesn't talk of interdisciplinarity, it doesn't talk of transdisciplinarity. It doesn't talk of employment. It doesn't talk of what's the mismatch between economy and education. It doesn't talk of also what the challenges are, future challenges are, which I described in very brief terms. One can get into details of each one of them. What does it mean in terms of competency, be for training a civil engineer or a geologist? Parthiv's discipline. We have one health concept and whatnot, etc. There are a whole set of issues which are coming up in genetic diseases and so on, etc. Is our education curriculum going to be discussed in those terms or not? If you are wanting to create new competencies for those particular, now that can only happen through collaboration, such transdisciplinarity, such interdisciplinarity. And the industry has not shown the potential. Indian Private Sector Industry, CII. I was on the Science, Technology and Policy Committee till all of them were only seeking concessions, further tax benefits. There have been huge amount of tax benefits given from 1980 onwards to the industry to set up R&D centers, to set up engineering areas. But though no investment comes, tax benefits are taken. There's a whole scam if you look at the hospitals. All of them enjoy the tax benefits for R&D. Do they do research? I did a report on the biomedical education and R&D and innovation. This was the area which Mashelkar used to talk of. Every year after 2010, we'll put out a molecule in the market from India. We haven't put out even one molecule. And it's 2023. The question is, when we are talking of our STEM education, science, technology, engineering, mathematics education, I'll come to liberal arts and humanities separately. 5 minutes. Whenever you say, the challenge which lies in the fact that how are you going to produce this linkage, this collaboration? Can it be done through clustering? Can it be done by destroying the affiliate framework which has the university? And through the CCFUB, the certificate, diploma, and degree with honors? Answer is no. And can you do it through the kind of examples which I've given you, the way they are actually regulation? You know, in fact, this is a total devaluation of the degrees. Nothing else. The higher education is going to be so much devalued as, and it's already devalued. As far as the industrial employer is concerned, it considers these degrees of not much use. And you are going to find even in general education in the university, people not enrolling. Surajit drew our attention to the fact that there was a rise in the GR and there is a slowdown. And that's because of this precisely the problem. People are, after joining, also dropping out. The solution is not that multiple entries and exit. Solution is not even soft skills. Solution is not even the glib talk of lifelong learning. You know, the document talks of lifelong learning. Connection with the live world, people, of the economy. You can have education. You can have education for sustainable development. Sustainable development goals, just now we analyzed it, and I do not know whether slides could have been on. I could have shown selectively some of the slides. That the overall publications on such sustainable development goals in India amounted to 77,005, which is about 12% of the total research publications. So research, which is an advanced thing, what to talk of translating it into education, knowledge production, knowledge utilization, knowledge dissemination. These are all interlinked areas. And in fact, state universities, which have very little research facilities, NRF was supposed to be set up. National Research Foundation. Where it is placed now? Anybody guess? Department of Science and Technology. Even when SERP, the Science and Engineering Research Board, when Kapil Sibal was the minister, when it was set up, I said state higher education councils and state S&T council should. See, remember, education, higher education, is a very diverse country. When we became independent, we had lot of diversity and plurality in our systems. My favorite Higher Education Commission report is Radhakrishnan Commission report, 1948, and not Kothari Commission. It argues for shocked of no one university can be the replica of another university. You have autonomy for the university. Radhakrishnan committee actually argued against it. Today, if you want to talk of sustainable development goals, can you talk without linking it to the place? Is the Calcutta problem the same as Delhi problem? No. Education, you read liberal arts and humanities and not eliminate all the references to the caste system, eliminate all the struggles which have gone on in the country, whether it is around labor or whether it is around peasantry, you don't want them to mention it. Can this country put out such kind of liberal education which means producing illiterates, producing clones? Can you by then solve the sustainable development challenge, a democratic challenge of the country which is so diverse and plurality? Language, you know, I don't need to, it's obvious it is concerned. In fact, if Radhakrishnan Commission report, I said it's my favorite, because it spoke of around the rural economy. 93% of the people used to be at that time living in rural areas. So they produced a model called Rural University. There are only 15 institutions at the moment in the country which are called Rural Institute. Gandhi, Gram, these are few institutions. Rest of the institutions accounts for over 60, and it requires a huge science. Yesterday only, IVRI, the Indian Veterinary Research Institute, has said buffalo's urine is better than the cow urine. Cow urine is harmful bacteria. But our leadership in the regime as it exists wants to market cow urine and wants to do lynching. And if you don't want in liberal humanities and education and in science any such references, you think you can produce a person who will become Vishwaguru? The challenge is education policy. What it is talking of any challenges which we actually face at the moment. It's an ideological machine. It wants to produce an ideological machine. My time is short. Keeping in mind what Parthiv said, Is there a silver lining? That's my last point. Yes, we still have a education on concurrent. State governments have a lot of scope. My friend Surajit, I was yesterday talking to him, today I'm talking to him. There are 3 working groups, and in those particular working groups, Surajit is contributing. Similarly, Tamil Nadu, in the state, they have set up a committee in which people science movement. I belong to All India People Science Network. And president, and I think we got to take the providing what actually is required to be done and what kind of alternative. If in Calcutta University or in West education, economy, that if there is a connect and where there is a disconnect, how does one fix it? And for that, Kerala government is trying to think about, the government is about to think about. I can get into the details if there's a time, maybe in the question answer. Parthiv? Or should I take more, 2 minutes? I can spend some time on the whole issue of this, or whenever you want. 2 minutes. 2 minutes, okay. In the governance, there is no participation of students and teachers. It's now going to be run as corporations by board of directors. Now, in such a system where you have people being appointed, should I refer to Adani? SEBI, neither or Higher Education Regulatory Board, SEBI failed to regulate Adani. You think the Higher Education Regulatory Board, which we are setting up, and the way this clustering is taking place, which and these 3 universities which the standing committee took note of it, and upgrading autonomous college, is this the kind of regulation? Certainly not. Our participation in the governing body, the decision-making bodies, is a precondition. And we is taking proactive stand, saying this is the kind of change we require. And including, and the last point which I want to make, is not only public investment in higher education that you require equally public investment in the economy, in the societal missions. These days there is a very popular economist, I'm sure Surajit is an economist proper, Mariana Mazzucato, very tall lady, Institute of Public Policy in London. She has set up, I often meet her. She is talking of patient investment. That is how internet was created, this is how space was created, this is how new energy technologies were created, and talks of the kind of collaborations occur, and she is talking of societal missions required. India needs to have grand challenges which we face with regard to that, and through that, elite and non-elite institutions. There are advanced institutions in this country. Why should IITs be producing people only for the US companies and them? They should be involved with us in precisely societal mission in those institutions which have been unfortunate, meaning they haven't had that investment. So the collaborative programs, collaboration between elite and non-elite, collaboration, specific collaboration, this is the only way. And research should begin in the FIUP. And the last point, Parthiv, no multiple entry and exit, out. No breaking of university, but collaboration between various disciplines and institutions, and including the stakeholders, which can bring practitioner knowledge. I don't know whether you have heard of professor of practice, which they want to introduce now, 10% professors of practice. I wrote recently a paper on it, how actually it can become a meaningful possibility or not. I close it, no problem. The multiple entry and exit clustering are not the way forward. Public investment is required in higher education institution as well as in societal mission, so that the education and economy mismatch and the disconnect can be fixed. And that's the way the whole world is talking of. They're talking of developmental institutions and so on, etc. I will close it here. I do not want. Friends, listen to my friend Anirban. Yeah, please.
Dinesh, thank you. He really touches upon a very important sort of aspect, which is, was everything all right with the education system that we have till now? Or do we need a change there? Of course, we do need changes there to meet new societal needs, etc. Does the new economic policy cater to that, cater to those changes? No. It talks about radically reforming, changing, etc., but makes a mess of it. যেটা দিনেশ সামনে রাখলেন। আমাদের শেষ বক্তা নির্বাণ চট্টোপাধ্যায়, প্রখ্যাত সাংবাদিক, তার বক্তব্য শুনব। এখান থেকে সরে গেলেই প্রবলেম হচ্ছে। কার মোবাইল? বাস আপনি হ্যাঁ, ফাঁকা হলেই আওয়াজ করছে। আপনি শিগগির চলে আসুন।
একা থাকতে পারি না। Good afternoon, everybody. আমি ওয়েব কোটাকে আন্তরিকভাবে এক্সট্রিমলি সরি আন্তরিকভাবে কৃতজ্ঞতা এবং ধন্যবাদ জানাই আমাকে এখানে বলবার সুযোগ করে দেওয়ার জন্য, এবং একই সঙ্গে মার্জনা চেয়ে নিই, মার্জনা স্পর্ধার জন্য। কারণ সত্যি সত্যি বিশ্ববিদ্যালয়ের শিক্ষকদের সামনে উচ্চশিক্ষা কোন পথে এই বিষয়ে কথা বলার জন্য স্পর্ধা লাগে। তো সেই স্পর্ধাটুকু সঞ্চয় করেই এসেছি, কারণ একবার বলেছি আসবো, সুতরাং আসতেই হবে। কিন্তু সত্যি আমি মরমে মরে আছি, কারণ এই বিষয়টাতে আমি একেবারেই কিছুই বাইরে থেকে যেটুকু যা দেখার, খোঁজ খবর নেওয়ার, এইটুকুর বেশি কিছুই জানি না। এখানে এসে একটা আমার খুব উপকার হলো, আজকে দুজনের কথা শুনলাম এবং তার মধ্যে দিয়ে এতটাই, এটা আমি একটু বাড়িয়ে বলছি না, আন্তরিকভাবেই বলছি, এতটাই জানতে পারলাম যে সত্যি সত্যি আমার খুব কিছু কথা বলার এখানে ইচ্ছেই করছে না। আরও এই কারণে ইচ্ছে করছে না যে এর পরে কথা উঠে এসছে এবং আমি নিশ্চিত যে এই বিষয়ে অনেক আলোচনা হবে, সেই আলোচনাটা আমি শুনতে চাই, খুব মন দিয়ে শুনতে চাই, এবং যদি কিছু যোগ দেওয়ার থাকে যোগও দিতে চাই। সেজন্য আমি আমার বক্তব্য সংক্ষেপে বলবো। তার আরও একটা কারণ হচ্ছে, অনেকগুলো কথা ভাবছিলাম, তার বেশ কিছু কথা ইতিমধ্যে আরও অনেক ভালো করে, অনেক সমৃদ্ধ তথ্যের ভিত্তিতে, যুক্তির ভিত্তিতে বলা হয়ে গেছে, আমার আগের বক্তারা বলেছেন। একটা এডুকেশন পলিসি ন্যাশনাল যতবার আলোচনা, তাতে একটা প্রশ্ন বারবার মনে এসেছে নিজের, যে এইভাবে লেখাপড়া হয়, মানে একেবারে একটা মানে খুবই একটা লেখের জায়গা থেকে, যে এভাবে কি লেখাপড়া হয় অ্যাট অল। কথাগুলো শুনতে শুনতে আবার মনে হচ্ছিল যে এভাবে বোধহয় সত্যিই লেখাপড়া হয় না, অন্তত লেখাপড়া বলতে আমরা যা বুঝি, যা বুঝে এসেছি তা হয় না। এবং সম্ভবত সেই কারণেই এই যে ব্যবস্থাটা করতে চাওয়া হচ্ছে এই পলিসির মধ্যে দিয়ে, তাতে কি করে চয়েসের কথা বলা হচ্ছে, যে ছাত্রছাত্রীদের হবে তারা কে পড়বে, কোন সময়, ওই যে কথাটা একটা ব্যাংকের ইনভেস্ট করার মতো, যে আমি কিছুদিন পড়ে নিলাম, তারপর একটা ডিগ্রি খাপচাভাবে একটা ডিগ্রি কালেক্ট করে নিলাম, সার্টিফিকেট, ডিপ্লোমা, ডিগ্রি যাই বলি, এবং তারপর অন্য কিছু করলাম, তারপর আবার কিছুদিন পরে ফিরে এসে আবার অন্য একটা জায়গা থেকে আবার কিছুটা ডিপ্লোমা বা ডিগ্রি কিছু একটা কালেক্ট করলাম। এবং আমি কী নিয়ে পড়বো না পড়বো এগুলো সবই আমার কাছে। এবারে সুপার মার্কেটে যেভাবে নানা রকম পণ্য সাজানো থাকে, সাবানের 40 রকম, আমার চয়েস আছে, ফ্রিডম অফ চয়েস। তো এইটাও সেরকম একটা চয়েসের ব্যাপার, যে এখন আর কেউ ওপর থেকে চাপিয়ে দেবে না, এখন আমরা যে যার নিজের মতো করে পড়াশুনো করবো। এখন এটা দেখলেই মনে হয় যে পুরোটাই যেভাবে আমাদের চারপাশের বাজার একটা কর্পোরেটাইজড পৃথিবীতে যেভাবে বাজার জিনিসটা কাজ করে, এডুকেশনকে পুরোপুরি তার মধ্যে ঢুকিয়ে দেওয়া হচ্ছে। এডুকেশন তো অনেক দিন ধরেই সেরকম একটা প্রসেসের মধ্যেই আছে, ক্রমশই তার মধ্যে ঢুকে যাচ্ছে, আমরা জানি, আজও আলোচনা হলো। কিন্তু সেটাকে একেবারে নীতি হিসেবে, জাতীয় নীতি হিসেবে সেইটাকেই রাখা হচ্ছে সামনে, এবং ওইটাই থাকবে। তো এইটা মধ্যে এক ধরনের প্রচণ্ড রকমের প্রবঞ্চনা আছে, যে প্রবঞ্চনাটা কোনো না জানা থেকে, কম জানা থেকে যারা করেছেন তারা না জানা বা কম জানার থেকে করেছেন, এটা আমি একেবারেই মনে হয় না। তারা এটাকে একটা নীতি হিসেবেই করছেন, এবং এটা তাদের যে সামগ্রিক নীতি, অর্থাৎ রাষ্ট্র নামক ব্যাপারটাকে পুরোপুরি কর্পোরেট ক্যাপিটালের, গ্লোবাল কর্পোরেট ক্যাপিটালের ভেতরে ঢুকিয়ে নেওয়া, তারই একটা ওই এক্সিকিউটিভ কমিটি অফ গ্লোবাল ক্যাপিটাল যদি বলি, কথাটাকে, চেনা কথাটাকে একটু পাল্টে নিয়ে, তাহলে সেইটাই দাঁড়াচ্ছে। এবং এডুকেশন এখন সেইভাবেই একটা পণ্য হিসেবেই বিক্রি করা হবে। যে পারবে কিনবে, যে পারবে না কিনবে না, এবং যে যেরকম পারবে কিনবে। ওই লোকাল ট্রেনে এক রকমের সফট ড্রিঙ্কস বিক্রি হয়, যেটাকে যারা বিক্রি করেন তারা নিজেরাই শুনেছি 2 নম্বরই বলে বলেন, যে ওটার ব্র্যান্ডটা লেখা আছে হয়তো কোক বা পেপসি বা অন্য কোনো ব্র্যান্ড, কিন্তু জিনিসটা তার নয়। যারা কিনছেন তারাও জানেন, যারা বিক্রি করছেন তারাও জানেন, কিন্তু তারা একটা ব্র্যান্ড কিনে খাচ্ছেন। তো এডুকেশন জিনিসটাও ওরকমভাবেই এখনই তাই চলছে, বহু ক্ষেত্রে তাই চলছে, কিন্তু ওটাকে পলিসি হিসেবে বলে দেওয়া হবে। এইটা একটা প্রচণ্ড আতঙ্কের কারণ বলে আমার মনে হয়। এবং বিশেষ করে যে ধরনের মার্কেট থেকে ছেলেমেয়েরা কী পড়বে সেটা ঠিক হবে, এই যে চয়েস বলে ছেড়ে দেওয়া হচ্ছে, চয়েস তো কোনো ভ্যাকুয়ামে নয়, এটা তো একটা বাস্তব পরিস্থিতির মধ্যে থেকেই তারা চুজ করবেন। এবং তাতে মার্কেট বেসড চয়েস, অর্থাৎ যে ধরনের কোর্স নিলে চাকরি পাওয়া যাবে এর বলে তারা চুজ করবেন, সে ধরনের কোর্স কতটা, কোথায়, কীভাবে পড়ানো হবে, প্রথমত তার কোনো ঠিকানা নেই। আর দ্বিতীয়ত, তারা যখন মার্কেটে যাবেন তখন যে সত্যি সত্যি তারা চাকরি পাবেন এর তো কোনো রকম নিশ্চয়তা নেই, কারণ নিশ্চয়তা ব্যাপারটারই তো আর কোনো মানে থাকছে না। সুতরাং এই চয়েসের নাম করে একটা ভয়ঙ্কর রকমের ওই জগা খিচুড়ি শব্দটাই বোধহয় ঠিক, যে ওর মধ্যে ছেড়ে দেওয়া হচ্ছে। এবারে যদি একটু পিছিয়ে গিয়ে যদি একেবারে ন্যাশনাল এডুকেশন পলিসি ডকুমেন্টের গোড়ার কথাটা দেখি, তাহলে দেখা যাবে যে এখানে একটা রকমের কথা আছে। আমি 2টো বাক্য একটু জাস্ট লিখে নিয়ে এসেছিলাম, সেটা পড়ছি, একদম গোড়ার দিকে আছে। The main thrust of this policy regarding higher education is to end the fragmentation of higher education by transforming higher education institutions into large multidisciplinary universities, colleges and HEI clusters/knowledge hubs, each of which will aim to have 3,000 or more students. এটা আপনারা সবাই জানেন, কিন্তু আমি নিজের এটা রিফ্রেশ করার জন্য একটু পড়ে নিচ্ছি। এবং তারপরে কিছুটা পরে বলা আছে যে বাই 2040 all higher education institutions shall aim to become multidisciplinary institutions and shall aim to have larger student enrollments, preferably in thousands, blah blah blah. 2টো শব্দ, কনসলিডেশন এবং ফ্র্যাগমেন্টেশন। যে সিস্টেমটা আছে সেটা এই এডুকেশন পলিসি যারা তৈরি করেছে তাদের মতে ফ্র্যাগমেন্টেড সিস্টেম। ফ্র্যাগমেন্টেশন মানে কি? আমরা এতক্ষণ আলোচনায় যেটা শুনলাম সেটা হচ্ছে যে এই পলিসি যেভাবে চাইছে সেভাবে যদি কাজ করে তাহলে গোটা এডুকেশন সিস্টেমটাই ভয়ানকভাবে ফ্র্যাগমেন্টেড এবং ফ্র্যাকচার্ড হবে। ফ্র্যাগমেন্টেশন বলতে এখানে যেটা বলা হচ্ছে সেটা আসলে ডাইভার্সিটি। যে ডাইভার্সিটি এডুকেশনের জন্যে, ফর এডুকেশন ইন দ্য রিয়েল সেন্স, হোয়াট এভার বি দ্য রিয়েল সেন্স, টু ফ্লারিশ, এতদিন অবধি আমরা আমাদের অভিজ্ঞতা থেকে দেখে এসেছি এডুকেশন আমাদের সিস্টেমে হয়েছে। তার একটা মস্ত বড় কারণ হচ্ছে সেই ডাইভার্সিটিকে যথেষ্ট গুরুত্ব না দেওয়া। সুতরাং ডাইভার্সিটিটাকে আমাদের আরও অনেক বেশি আজকের ভারতবর্ষের এবং আজকের আন্তর্জাতিক পরিস্থিতিতে আমাদের আরও অনেক ডাইভার্সিটির প্রশ্নটাকে কি করে এনগেজ করা যায় এডুকেশনের মধ্যে দিয়ে, সেইটা আমাদের ভাবা দরকার ছিল। তার বদলে যেটা করা হলো সেটা হচ্ছে ডাইভার্সিটিকে ফ্র্যাগমেন্টেশন বলে কনসলিডেশন নাম করে একটা সেন্ট্রালাইজেশনের স্ট্রাকচার তৈরি করা হলো, যে সেন্ট্রালাইজেশনটা আসলে আবার ক্রমশই আরও বেশি করে সেন্ট্রালাইজড হতে থাকা ক্যাপিটালের দখলে থাকা যে বাজার তার অঙ্গ হয়ে গেল। অর্থাৎ যা বলা হচ্ছে আর যা করা হচ্ছে দুটো একেবারে উল্টো, এবং সেটা কোনো, আবারও বলছি যে সেটা কোনো না জেনে উল্টো নয়, সেটা পলিসিগতভাবে উল্টো। এইটা আমার যেটা মনে হয়েছে যে এই এডুকেশন পলিসির পিছনে যে চিন্তা, সেই চিন্তাটা যারা করেছেন তারা সম্ভবত অত্যন্ত গুছিয়ে করেছেন একেবারে। এটা মনে করার কোনো কারণ নেই যে এই চিন্তাটার মধ্যে কোনো গোলমাল আছে, কোনো গোলমাল নেই। আমার যেটা মনে হয়েছে ভীষণ ইন্টিগ্রাল চিন্তা, এবং যে কারণে ভয়ঙ্কর চিন্তা, যে এটার ফলে শিক্ষা বলে যে জিনিসটাকে চালানো হবে সেইটা সম্পূর্ণ তছনছ করে দেবে। সেটা নিয়ে দীর্ঘ আলোচনা হলো, সুতরাং আমি আর তার মধ্যে ঢুকবো না, আমি অত ভালো জানিও না। এবার পরের যে বিষয়টা, যেটা আমার মনে হয়েছে খুব গুরুত্বপূর্ণ, সেটা হলো যে তাহলে আমাদের কি করণীয়। আমাদের মানে আমি বৃহত্তর অর্থে বলছি যে নাগরিক সমাজ যদি বলি, তাহলে কি করণীয়। এইখানে একটা মস্ত বড় ভূমিকা নিতে পারতেন বা নেওয়ার দরকার ছিল রাজ্য সরকারের, এবং কয়েকটি রাজ্যে অন্ততপক্ষে সেই চেষ্টা অনেক দূর অবধি করা হচ্ছে, সেটাও আমরা একটু শুনলাম। পশ্চিমবঙ্গে খুবই দুর্ভাগ্যের কথা যে আমরা গোটা শিক্ষার যে পরিস্থিতি, সেখানে রাজ্য সরকারের যে ভূমিকা আমরা দেখছি বা যে ভূমিকার অভাব আমরা দেখছি, সেইটা খুবই পীড়াদায়ক বললে কিছু বলা হবে না, ভয়ঙ্কর রকমের উদ্বেগজনক। এই একেবারে গোড়ায় যে ওই ক্রোনোলজিটা বুঝে নেওয়া আজকাল খুব দরকার হয়ে গেছে। তো ক্রোনোলজিটা যদি আরেকবার ভেবে নিই, যে 2020 সালের যখন কোভিড একটা ভয়ঙ্কর অবস্থায় আছে, সেই সময় কেন্দ্রীয় সরকার একটি নীতি ক্যাবিনেটে অ্যাপ্রুভ করিয়ে নিলেন, যেরকম সেই সময় আরও ভয়ঙ্কর কতগুলো নীতি অ্যাপ্রুভ করিয়ে নেওয়া হয়েছিল। তারপরে কি হলো, সব চুপচাপ। তখন কোভিড চলছে, ইত্যাদি চলছে, সব চুপচাপ। 2022-এর বোধহয় এপ্রিল হবে, রাজ্য সরকার তার আগে একেবারে কোনো কথা বলেনি তা নয়, সম্ভবত 2-4 জায়গাতে বলেছিলেন যে না আমরা এটা মানি না, ইত্যাদি ইত্যাদি, কিন্তু ওই মানিনার কোনো মানে নেই। ওটা একেবারেই আমাদের চেনা কতগুলো বাঁধা গত, ওটার মধ্যে যে কোনো কংক্রিট একটা চিন্তা ছিল তার কোনো ছাপ অন্তত আমরা দেখিনি। চিন্তা থাকলেও তারা খুব যত্ন করে সেই চিন্তাগুলোকে লুকিয়ে রেখেছিলেন, ফলে আমরা কেউ দেখতে পাইনি যে রাজ্য সরকার কি মনে করছেন। কি হলো, এপ্রিল মাসে একটা কমিটি বসানো হলো, 10 জন সদস্যের কমিটি। তারা যারা কমিটির সদস্য তারা দেশের বিদেশের প্রত্যেকেই অত্যন্ত সম্মানিত, খুব বড় মাপের অ্যাকাডেমিশিয়ান। কিন্তু তারপর কি হলো, একটা কমিটি যদি বসে এবং তাদের যদি বলা হয় যে আপনারা এই এডুকেশন পলিসি পর্যালোচনা করুন, করে আমাদের পরামর্শ দিন যে আমাদের কী করা উচিত, কতটা নেওয়া উচিত, কতটা নেওয়া উচিত নয়, তাই বলা হয়েছিল তখন। তাহলে তারা সেটা নিয়ে আলোচনা করবেন নিজেরা, সেটা নিয়ে এক ধরনের একটা একটু বৃহত্তর গোষ্ঠীর সঙ্গে তারা ইন্টারঅ্যাক্ট করবেন, এগুলোই তো আমরা ধরে নেব। কিন্তু সেসব কিছু হলো না। সম্ভবত একটা অনলাইন কনফারেন্স সেই কমিটির হয়েছিল, এবং তারপর যেটা শোনা গেল জানুয়ারি মাস এই বছরের তারা একটা রিপোর্ট দিয়েছেন। সেই রিপোর্টটা সম্পর্কে তাও প্রায় কোনো খবর বাইরে কিছুই পাওয়া যায় না, মানে আমি মিডিয়ার কথা বলছি, ভেতরের খবর তো বলতে পারবো না, মিডিয়ার খবরই বলতে পারবো। যেটা জানা গেল সেটা হচ্ছে যে ওই কমিটির যে খুবই সম্মানিত যে সদস্যরা, তারা প্রত্যেকে নিজের নিজের মতটা জানিয়েছেন, অ্যান্ড দোজ হ্যাভ বিন কোলেটেড, দি ওপিনিয়ন্স অফ অল অফ দেম হ্যাভ বিন কোলেটেড। সো কোলেট করে রাজ্য সরকারের কাছে দেওয়া হয়েছে, এবং তখন উচ্চশিক্ষা দপ্তর থেকে বলা হলো যে এবারে এটার বিষয়ে রাজ্য সরকার চিন্তাভাবনা করবেন, যেগুলো নেওয়ার কি করা যায় না যায় দেখবেন। বেশ, ইতিমধ্যে কি হলো, ইউজিসি থেকে একটা সার্কুলার এলো, সেটাও জানুয়ারি মাসে, এবং তাতে বলা হলো, এটার আমার একটা শব্দ ক্ষয় করার দরকার নেই, এটাতে বলা হলো যে এই নতুন বছর থেকে, একাডেমিক ইয়ার থেকে নতুন সিস্টেম চালু করে দেওয়া হবে, এবং রাজ্য সরকার তার কয়েকদিনের মধ্যে রেজিস্ট্রারদের, একটা ইউনিভার্সিটি রেজিস্ট্রারদের নির্দেশ পাঠিয়ে দিলেন যে তাহলে এর জন্য যা যা করা দরকার। তারপরে ভাইস চ্যান্সেলার্স কমিটি বসলো, তারপর প্রিন্সিপালস কমিটি বসলো, ইত্যাদি ইত্যাদি। ব্যাপারটা হচ্ছে যে এই গোটা প্রসেসটার মধ্যে কোথাও এই যদি 2022-এর এপ্রিলটাকেই ধরি, তার আগের কথাটা ভুলেও যাই, কোথাও কোনো যেটাকে বলে কনসালটেটিভ প্রসেস, ডেলিবারেটিভ প্রসেস, তার কোথাও কোনো লক্ষণ নেই। কতগুলো কমিটি, সেই কমিটি খুবই সম্মানিত, আবারও বলছি, কিন্তু কমিটি ইজ কমিটি। এবং ওই সি নর্থকোট পার্কিনসন কমিটোলজি বলে একটা জিনিস নিয়ে অনেক কথা লিখে গেছেন মজা করে। তো এই ধরনের কমিটির ক্ষেত্রে অনেক সময়তেই মনে হয় যে প্রথমত কমিটি কিভাবে তাদের রেকমেন্ডেশন তৈরি করেন সেটা আমরা জানি না, আমরা দ্য লেসার মর্টালস। আর দুই হচ্ছে সেই রকম রেকমেন্ডেশনগুলো নিয়ে সরকার কি করেন সেটাও আমরা কখনো জানতে পারি না। যদি তাই হয় তাহলে এটা তো কোনো ডেলিবারেটিভ প্রসেস হতে পারে না। এবং বিশেষ করে যে ক্ষেত্রে বিশ্ববিদ্যালয় এবং কলেজের শিক্ষকদের মতামত জানাটা অত্যন্ত জরুরি ছিল। কিন্তু আমি শুধু সেখানেই থামতে চাইব না। আমার মনে হয় বারবার যে যদি একটা সত্যিকারের ডেমোক্রেটিক প্রসেস এডুকেশনের ভেতরে নিয়ে আসতে হয়, তাহলে তো শুধু শিক্ষকদের কথা শোনাটাও যথেষ্ট নয় বোধহয়, ছাত্রছাত্রীদের কথা শোনাটাও তো খুব গুরুত্বপূর্ণ। সুতরাং শিক্ষক এবং ছাত্রছাত্রী, এই উভয়, শিক্ষক শিক্ষিকা এবং ছাত্রছাত্রী, এই উভয় গোষ্ঠীকে একসঙ্গে নিয়ে, এবং সেটা কোনো একটা বিশেষ ফোরামের মধ্যে দিয়েই সবটা করতে হবে তারও তো কোনো মানে নেই। এটার তো অনেক রকমের পদ্ধতি থাকতে পারে, নানা রকম সংগঠন আছে, সংগঠনের বাইরে নানা রকম গোষ্ঠী আছে, গোষ্ঠীর বাইরে নানা রকমের নতুন কমিউনিটি ছোট বড় তৈরি করা যায়, কিছু কিছু তৈরি হয়ে আছে। তাহলে সেই গণতান্ত্রিক প্রক্রিয়াটা কোথায়, তার চেষ্টা যেটাকে বলে সেটা কোথায়? আমরা সেটা কিচ্ছু দেখিনি। সুতরাং যে যারা সরকার চালাচ্ছেন, যারা উচ্চশিক্ষা দপ্তর চালাচ্ছেন, তাদের মাথাতে যে এরকম কোনো চিন্তা আছে যে আদৌ এ নিয়ে ভাবা যায় যে অনেকের সঙ্গে কথা বলে, তার কোনো লক্ষণ আমরা আজ অবধি দেখতে পাইনি। গত 1 বছর ধরে পশ্চিমবঙ্গে শিক্ষা নিয়ে প্রায় প্রতিদিন শিক্ষা কথাটা আছে এরকম সংবাদ প্রতিদিন খবরের কাগজে বেরোচ্ছে, টেলিভিশন চ্যানেল দেখানো হচ্ছে, কিন্তু সেইগুলো কি খবর আমরা জানি। সুতরাং এই সরকার বা যারা শাসক দল তারা এই নিয়ে কোনো রকম চিন্তাভাবনা করছেন বলে আমরা বুঝতে পারিনি। সেই কারণে আমাদের মতো রাজ্যের পক্ষে এই জাতীয় শিক্ষানীতি এবং এই জাতীয় শিক্ষানীতি তার ভয়ঙ্কর একটা প্রভাব আরও বেশি পড়বে বলে আশঙ্কা। শেষ যে কথাটা বলার সেটা হচ্ছে যে রাজ্য সরকার না হয় এইরকমই হলেন, আমরা তো এইরকম রাজ্য সরকারই পেয়েছি, এটা তো আমরাই পেয়েছি, আমরা এই রাজ্যের মানুষ, তারাই যেভাবেই হোক আমাদের হাতে এই রাজ্য সরকার আছে, এই শাসক দল আছে। তো আমরা কি করতে পারি? এইখানে আমার একটা খুব বিনীত এবং সম্ভবত স্পর্ধিত একটা নিবেদন আছে, সেটা হচ্ছে যে শিক্ষকরা, কলেজ বিশ্ববিদ্যালয়ের শিক্ষকরা কি আরও অনেক বেশি প্রোঅ্যাক্টিভ কথাটা আমি খুব জোর দিয়েই বলতে চাই, অনেক বেশি প্রোঅ্যাক্টিভলি এই আজকে যে ধরনের আলোচনা হচ্ছে, প্রতিবাদ হচ্ছে, একটা বিকল্প নীতির কথা ভাবা হচ্ছে, কি হতে পারে সেই নিয়ে চিন্তা করা হচ্ছে, সেটা কি আরও অনেক বেশি, আরও অনেক দিন ধরে এই কাজটা করার দরকার ছিল না? এবং যদি না করা হয়ে থাকে, পাস্ট ইজ পাস্ট, ওটা নিয়ে ভেবে আর এই মুহূর্তে কোনো লাভ নেই। কিন্তু এই পাস্টের, এই অতীতের অভিজ্ঞতা থেকে আমরা যদি আমাদের প্রয়োজনীয় যে শিক্ষাই বলবো, শিক্ষাটা গ্রহণ করে যদি এখন থেকে যত বেশি সম্ভব জোর দিয়ে এবং যত বড় করে সম্ভব শিক্ষক এবং ছাত্রছাত্রীরা একযোগে যদি একটা এই শিক্ষানীতির বা শিক্ষানীতির নামে যেটা করার চেষ্টা করা হচ্ছে সেটার একটা খুব বড় রকমের ক্রিটিক তৈরি করতে পারি, এবং তার মধ্যে যদি, এই কারণে পারি বললাম, পারেন না বলে, যে তার মধ্যে যদি সমস্ত যে কোনো সচেতন নাগরিক যারা এই বিষয়ে উৎসাহী তাদের জড়িত করে নিতে পারি, তাহলে কি সত্যি একটা বড় রকমের সামাজিক আন্দোলন তৈরি করা যায় এই মর্মে যে এই ধরনের শিক্ষানীতি যেটা চাপিয়ে দেওয়া হচ্ছে সেটা শুধু এখনকার পক্ষে নয়, সেটা ভবিষ্যতের পক্ষে ভয়ঙ্কর রকমের বিপজ্জনক। অর্থাৎ সোজা কথায় আমাদের সামাজিক আন্দোলনের যে ঘাটতিগুলো আছে, বহু ক্ষেত্রে আছে, শিক্ষার ক্ষেত্রেও সেটা ভীষণভাবে আছে, সেই ঘাটতি পূরণ করার কতটা চেষ্টা আমরা করতে পারি এবং সেখানে শিক্ষকরা কতটা ভূমিকা নিতে পারেন। আমি এই বিনীত নিবেদনটুকু আপনাদের কাছে রেখি আমার বক্তব্য শেষ করছি। অনেক ধন্যবাদ।
ধন্যবাদ অনির্বাণ চট্টোপাধ্যায়কে। খুব তীক্ষ্ণ আহ্বান জানিয়েছেন আমাদের শিক্ষক সমাজকে। এই যে বিকল্প শিক্ষানীতি, এই যে শিক্ষানীতি আমাদের সামনে আমাদের মাথার উপর চাপিয়ে দেওয়া হয়েছে, তার যে অসারতা বা তার যে কি প্রভাব আমাদের ভবিষ্যতে পড়বে, তার বিরুদ্ধে জনমত এবং সরকারের উপর চাপ সৃষ্টি করা, এই কাজে দায়িত্ব আমাদের রয়েছে। এবং আমরা আশা করব যে এরকম তো শুধু একটি ছোট্ট একটি প্রেক্ষাগৃহে, একটি সভাগৃহে ছোট্ট একটি আলোচনা সভা, এই আলোচনা সভা থেকে নিশ্চয়ই সেই আন্দোলন একটা ছোট বিন্দুর মতো একটা হয়তো তার প্রদান হতে পারে, কিন্তু এমন আলোচনা, এমন পদক্ষেপ সারা রাজ্যে খুব দ্রুত জোরদারভাবে সংগঠিত হোক আমাদের আশা। এবং আপনারা জানেন যে ইতিমধ্যে রাজ্যে একটি সংগঠন তৈরি হয়েছে, রাইট টু এডুকেশন ফোরাম বলে। সেই রাইট টু এডুকেশন ফোরামের ছাতার তলায় আমাদের ইচ্ছা, আমাদের আশা যে বিভিন্ন যে সমস্ত যারা স্টেক হোল্ডার রয়েছেন, যারা এই উচ্চশিক্ষার সঙ্গে, শিক্ষার সঙ্গে যারা জড়িত, এই শিক্ষানীতি যাদের সরাসরি প্রভাবিত করবে, এমনকি অভিভাবকরাও যাদের ওপর অবশ্যই এই শিক্ষানীতির অভিঘাত এসে পড়বে, তারা সবাই সমবেত হবেন এবং রাইট টু এডুকেশন ফোরামের মতো যে প্রচেষ্টা, সেই প্রচেষ্টাকে সামনে নিয়ে আমরা এর বিরুদ্ধে প্রতিবাদ সংগঠিত করতে পারবো। কিন্তু শুধু তাই নয়, সেটা হচ্ছে যে এই যে নীতিটা আমাদের, এই যে ধরুন সিসিএফইউপি, কিছু প্রায়োগিক দিক আছে, সেটাও পাশাপাশি মাথায় রাখার ভীষণ প্রয়োজন বলে আমার মনে হচ্ছে ব্যক্তিগতভাবে। সেটা হলো এই যে একটা সুরক্ষা বলয় বোধহয় তৈরি করার কথা আমাদের ভাবার সময় এসেছে খুব দ্রুত। যদি ধরেই নিই যে এই শিক্ষানীতি আমাদের উপর চাপিয়ে দেওয়া হলো, ধরে নিই যে সামনের শিক্ষাবর্ষ বা তারপরের শিক্ষাবর্ষ থেকে এই শিক্ষানীতি, এই সিসিএফইউপি নামক যে বস্তুটি আমাদের উপর চাপানো হচ্ছে, তার প্রয়োগ শুরু হয়ে যাবে, তাহলে তার আগে কি এমন কিছু আটঘাট বাঁধা সম্ভব? যেমন শুনতে পাচ্ছি কেরালাতে, যেমন শুনতে পাচ্ছি তারা একটা কথা বলছে যে এরকম মাঝপথে এরকম বেরিয়ে টেরিয়ে যাওয়া যাবে না, এরকম যেটা এখান থেকেও আলোচনায় উঠে এলো যে যত দূর সম্ভব একটা ছাত্রকে তার যে শিক্ষা, তার যে ব্যাপ্তি, সেটাকে তাকে পুরো ব্যাপ্ত শিক্ষা দিয়ে তারপরেই যেন সে শিক্ষাঙ্গন, উচ্চ শিক্ষাঙ্গন থেকে বেরোতে পারে, এরকম কিছু ভাবা যায় কি না, বা আর কি কি আটঘাট বাঁধা যায়। তার জন্য বোধহয় আমাদের ছোট কিছু মানে ওয়ার্কিং গ্রুপ বা ইত্যাদি তৈরি করে সেসব চিন্তা, নিশ্চয়ই ওয়েবকোটার নেতৃত্ব এখানে রয়েছেন, আইফুক্টোর নেতৃত্ব এখানে রয়েছেন, আপনারা যদি এগিয়ে আসেন তাহলে সেটা বোধহয় এই মুহূর্তের খুব আশু প্রয়োজন বলে আমার মনে হচ্ছে। পাশাপাশি যেমন অবশ্য প্রতিবাদ চলবে, যেমন জোরদার আন্দোলন চলবে ইত্যাদি, কিন্তু এই সুরক্ষা বলয় আসলে ছাত্রদের কি করে আমি সুরক্ষিত করব, আমাদের শিক্ষাঙ্গনগুলোকে কি করে সুরক্ষিত করব একদম ধসে পড়ার মুখ থেকে, বিপর্যয়ের মুখ থেকে বাঁচাবার জন্যে, সে চিন্তা বোধহয় করার সময় মানে গতকাল ছিল, মানে এসে গেছে বলাটাও ভুল, আমরা সেই গতকাল মানে ভাবার দরকার। খুব আমরা আধ ঘন্টা পিছিয়ে আছি, আমাদের ইচ্ছা